From India.
From India, yes. Who's going to talk about non-offspring nursing and free-ranging domestic dogs? So please.
Thanks. I'm coming from West Bengal, India. Before my presentation, I express my gratitude to Purina Pet Care Company because they provided travel award, so I am able to attend this conference. I am also grateful to all the members of the ISAE, especially Mayra Harris, Mark Rutter, Professor Suzanne. They provided by free membership since 1998. So I am able to do the research work from India. Special thanks to the organizing committee, local organizing committee, especially Professor Atko and Professor Miro for their generous help. Now I present my paper, Non-Offspring Nursing in Free-Ranging Domestic Dogs. Previously, I studied the parental care during weaning in free-ranging dogs, and it was published in Applied Animal Behavior Science. Further studies were done on pup rearing, the role of mothers and allo mothers in free-ranging domestic dogs, and it was published in Applied Animal Behavior Science in 2021. The aims of the study were to record the frequency of non-offspring nursing contact and nursing bout, duration of non-offspring nursing contact and nursing bout, duration of nursing contact and nursing bout in relation to group size, and also to study the role of mothers in relation to feeding by regurgitation and also in relation to protection for the kin-related pups. This study was conducted in the town of Katwa in the state of West Bengal, India. Garbage, butcheries, and restaurants were the chief food resources for the dogs and were scattered throughout the town area, study area. Markets, garages, timber yards, cow sheds, and poultry farms were used as dens for whelping. Materials and methods. When more than one dog lived together for at least 1 year, defended a common territory, shared resources like food and shelters were considered as a group. A total of 8 material-related dog groups, ranging 2 to 3 females per group, consisting of 17 adult females that roamed freely throughout the day and night, and whose home ranges and prior reproductive histories were known. Group history, relationship between the dogs and their pups. In the NP group, this is NP group, the beach NP, first right side NP F1 and left side NP F2. The NPF1 right side, NPF1 only nursed her own puppies. But interestingly, the NPF2, the daughter of NPF1, rejected her own puppies. As a result, within 2 weeks, all the pups died. But interestingly, from the 3rd week, she nursed the pups of her mother, showing the altruistic behavior. Here, NPF1 is mother and NPF2 daughter. She's nursing the pups of her mother, showing the altruistic behavior. When a lactating female was observed to provide nursing, regurgitating food, and protection to the kin-related pups of the same group are considered as non-offspring care, and the lactating mothers are considered as allo mothers. litter sizes were based on the first sighting of the pups, and pup survival was estimated from the difference between number at the first sighting and number observed over the following months. Non-offspring, same group, but two mothers, they are nursing each other's pups. Nursing bouts are defined as infants making nipple contact. End of the nursing bout was determined when by the appearance of punishing activities of the mothers when the pups tried to suckle more time. I used aggressive behavior towards strangers as a proxy to record protection of pups. An aggressive behavior or encounter was defined as any encounter in which another dog or other animals were noticed within 20 meters of the litter and was threatened or chased. Data collection began in 19 and continued until the end of May 21 using focal animal sampling. Immediately after patrician, the focal dog groups were observed 3 times per day with 30-minute observation session between 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. and a total of 273 hours was devoted to collect data for individual group for this 2-year study. Occasionally, the dog groups were observed from some kind of hiding places without disturbing them, and a pair of binoculars are used because in case of free-ranging animals, normal behavior is obtained only without disturbing the animals. If we disturb, actually normal behavior is not possible to get. So occasionally I studied the dogs from some hiding places. The date and time of persuasion was confirmed by direct observation and occasionally by interviews with the area residents. Data were collected on a weekly basis, and data collection continued for the first 13 weeks of rearing or until weaning. Statistics were done by these methods. In this 2-year study, all the focal females were observed to produce litters with mean litter size 6.35 and ranging 2 to 11 pups per liter. Throughout the study, a total of 216 pups were produced, of which 94 pups survived to the age of 13 weeks. So pup mortality was 56%. And showing the lactating females produce litters, showing late monsoon as the peak period of pup rearing. A total of, in this 2-year study, a total of 2,515 mother-year nursing contacts were recorded, of which 1,255 non-offspring nursing contacts were recorded as non-offspring nursing contact. The frequency of nursing contact varied from 44 to 140. So there were significant variations among the free-ranging among the allo mothers in relation to non-offspring nursing contact. Also, there were no significant yearly variation among the females in relation to the frequency of nursing contact. Weekly mean frequency of non-offspring nursing contact varied from 0.46 0.47 to 8.97 minute per hour, and there were significant weekly variations among the lactating females. Moreover, the weekly frequency of nursing contact increased until the pups reached 6 weeks of age and then decreased. Weekly frequency of nursing contact for each group varied from 2.58 to 6.36 per week times, and there were significant weekly variations among the groups, dog groups. Interestingly, the weekly mean frequency of non-offspring contact in relation to group size, when groups the frequency decreased with the group size. Group size increased, the frequency of contact being shown. There is a negative correlation. Duration of non-offspring contact. Also, duration of free-ranging dogs, non-nursing contact for each female also varied with the females. Weekly, there are weekly variations among the females, and the frequency increased up to 6 years and then decreased in all cases. There is the relationship between the frequency of nursing contact and nursing bout. There was no relation between nursing contact and nursing bout. It was nursing contact was more than the nursing bouts. From this study, I propose 4 possible reasons of allow nursing in case of free-ranging dogs. Number 1, having excess meal, perhaps due to high mortality. Allow nursing may evolve as low-cost behavior in free-ranging dogs. Allow nursing may provide substantial benefit to pups regarding growth, survival, and transfer to immune compounds. Insufficiency of own mother's milk may be one of the causes of allow nursing. Free-ranging domestic dogs nurse each other's pup, perhaps to promote to a set of appealing and permissive relationship among the group members. As the studied groups continued material related females, dogs help each other with allow nursing. This study strongly suggests the kin selection theory, especially as allow nursing is highly prevalent in other closely related gregarious wild canids, grey wolves, golden jackals. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
So we have time for a question. If anyone has a question, I don't know whether any of the online participants have one. I can't see any. Yes, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this talk. It was really interesting. I think you've mentioned that there was a difference, that there wasn't any difference. Sorry, that there was difference in the time that pups had contact with the female depending on the group size. So yeah, the bigger the group, the less time they were in contact. But wouldn't be a proxy of the group size? So
actually, all the contacts are not resulting in the nipple contact. when the pups are in close proximity of the lactating or allow mothers are considered as contacts, but during all contacts, they do not suckle the nipple. So there is a difference between frequency of contact and also duration of contact and duration of nursing bout.
I just wondered if there was any difference in the time that pups were in contact after controlling for the group size, if we had a chance to explore that.
Actually, it was a natural, the study was done in the natural, so there is no question to control the time. I actually 30-minute observation session, I observed these results.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. So now for our next speaker, Ainsley Romanek. Please, Ainsley is going to talk about the effect of damp, fear, and stress on puppy welfare. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Just gonna pull it up here. I have until 11:30, correct? Ish, okay. Okay, so my name's Ainsley Romanek. I'm a PhD candidate in Dr. Candace Croney's lab at Purdue University. And today I'm going to be talking about one of our studies that's on the effect of dam, fear, and stress on puppy welfare in commercial breeding kennels. So approximately 54% of US households have a dog. And over the years, there's been an increasing perception of dogs as family members in the US. So there's no surprise that there's a high demand for dogs. But where do people in the US get their dogs from? Well, data shows us that similar proportions of people actually adopt and purchase their dogs, as you can see here. And there's a high demand for purebred dogs. So around 30% of people say they acquired a dog in a specific manner because they wanted a specific breed or type of dog. And in 2016, around 50% of dogs owned were purebred. Therefore, although we're seeing this increased attention on adopting a dog from a shelter, acquiring a dog from a breeder is still a popular option. With that said, in the US, there's an extremely negative public perception of dog breeders. So if I Google puppy from a breeder, it brings up multiple articles with negative headlines such as sick puppies or neglect or horrible conditions for dogs in puppy mills. However, it's important to remember that the majority of these articles are likely depicting illegal puppy mills and hoarding situations and not legally operating commercial breeding kennels. However, because puppy mills don't have a clear definition, legally operating commercial breeding kennels often get lumped into this story, even though they are not the same thing. Legally operating commercial breeding kennels are required to operate in accordance with state and/or federal laws based on the number of dams they have and where they sell their puppies to. However, due to this high level of concern, we are interested in seeing if dogs from commercial breeding kennels are subjected to some of the same negative experiences. So some of the first work done in this area were owner reports. And they cited that dogs from puppy mills, I have this in quotations here because we don't exactly know where the puppies came from, had high levels of fear, nervousness, and physical health issues. Another study cited that puppies from pet stores, so presumably coming from commercial breeding kennels, had high levels of fear and aggression. However, like I said before, the main limitation of these studies is that we don't exactly know where these dogs came from, if it was an illegal operation or an legally operating commercial breeding kennel. So that led to the need for in-kennel assessments. And our lab has done work at US Midwestern commercial breeding kennels and actually found that the majority of dogs were affiliative to stranger approach and were physically healthy. However, in more recent studies with behavioral tests that involve getting closer to dogs and going into their pens, they showed fearful behavior. Therefore, moving forward, we need to ask ourselves, how can we reduce their fear and optimize their welfare, not only to be able to cope with the stressors in the kennel, but potentially if they're rehomed after their breeding careers as well. So before we can do this, we need to ask ourselves what factors could be impacting dog welfare in commercial breeding kennels. Well, we know things like socialization play a large role, as well as management and husbandry practices. But we also know, based primarily on literature and other species, that maternal factors can impact offspring welfare. And this has not been studied in this population, and there's only a handful of studies in dogs. So we chose to focus on this here. And we know maternal factors can impact offspring welfare via a variety of mechanisms. One being genetics. We know fear from the dam is heritable, as well as different types of fear, so stranger-directed fear and non-social fear, as well as prenatal stress. We know in a study in blue foxes that offspring of prenatally stressed vixens had higher levels of glucocorticoids, decreased adrenal weights, and increased behavioral reactivity. And also maternal care. In the handful of studies we have in dogs, we know that quantity and quality of maternal care can affect puppies' coping in response to a variety of stressors. And in other species, fear and stress may impact the level of maternal care that's provided to offspring. Therefore, that leads to the question, is dam welfare related to puppy welfare in commercial breeding kennels? And like I said before, there's no studies in this population. And it's important that we don't just draw on literature from other populations, because there have been population differences in the effect on puppy welfare and things like genetics and prenatal stress and maternal care. Plus, if we're using this to inform legislation or breeder practices, we really want it to be tailored to this population. And this has important implications for dams and commercial breeding kennels and their welfare, as well as the welfare of puppies that are being sold to the US public. Therefore, our research question was, do fearful and stressed dams have welfare impaired puppies? And we hypothesized that dams who scored high on behavioral measures of fear and physiological measures of chronic stress would have puppies who score similarly on equivalent measures. So to conduct this study, we enrolled 12 commercial breeding kennels. We tested 92 dams and 390 puppies. And dams and puppies were continuously housed together from whelping until weaning, which was around 47 days. In dams, we collected metrics at 6 weeks prepartum, which was intended to be sort of our baseline measure because they were under the least influence of hormones and environmental and management changes due to the periparturient period during this time. And then we also tested them at both 4 and 8 weeks postpartum. And at every time point, we collected physiologic metrics, which included hair cortisol concentration, or HCC, which is a measure of longer-term chronic stress, fecal glucocorticoid metabolites, or FGM, which is a measure of shorter, more acute stress, and fecal immunoglobulin A, which is a measure of mucosal immune function. We also conducted a 1-minute isolation test at 8 weeks postpartum, where we recorded behaviors such as locomotion, exploration, and stationary durations, as well as behaviors indicative of stress, such as lip licking, paw lifting, and body shaking. We also conducted a stranger approach test in the dam's home pen, where we classified their response to immediate stranger approach as either red, indicating fearful or stereotypic behavior, yellow indicating ambivalent behavior, and green indicating friendly or affiliative behavior. And throughout this test, we also indicated if the dog would take treats from the experimenter. We also collected a variety of physical health metrics, which included body condition score, cleanliness, tear staining, and the others listed here. Then in puppies, we collected data at both 4 and 8 weeks old. We again collected physiologic metrics from both one focal puppy that was randomly selected per litter, as well as at the litter level. And again, we collected FGM and IgA. We conducted a 1-minute isolation test at both time points, looking at some of the same behaviors in adults, so locomotion, exploration, stationary behaviors, and behaviors indicative of stress. We then conducted a stranger approach test. However, this time it was immediately after isolation while the puppies were still in their isolation pen. And we classified their immediate response to stranger approach as either no approach, ambivalent approach, or approaching the person. And again, like the adults, we indicated if they would eat treats throughout this test. We then collected a variety of physical health metrics that were adapted for puppies. So body condition score on a scale of 1 to 3, cleanliness, tear staining like the adults, and then we had upper respiratory infection symptoms, diarrhea, and skin infections. And we analyzed this data using simple linear regressions and Spearman's correlations. So in terms of our results for the physiologic metrics, we found significant positive associations between dam FGM at 8 weeks postpartum and puppy FGM at 8 weeks old for both the focal puppies and the litters. And it's important to remember here that dams and puppies were no longer housed together at this time, and puppies were weaned. So this shows us that measures of acute stress indicated by the FGM may be associated between dams and puppies. We also found that dam HCC at 4 weeks postpartum was positively associated with litter FGM at 4 weeks old. However, they were housed together during this time, and this is likely due to lactation because we know glucocorticoids can be passed on in the milk. Then we found a significant negative association between dam HCC at 6 weeks prepartum, which was again intended to be more of our baseline metric, and 8-week-old focal puppy FGM. So here it looks like increased measures of chronic stress in dams may be associated with blunted measures of acute stress in puppies, which has also been indicated in other species. In terms of the isolation test, we found significant positive associations between dam exploration duration and stationary duration and 8-week puppy durations of the same respective behaviors, indicating that behavioral responses to an acute stressor of isolation is associated in dams and puppies. And then in terms of the stranger approach test and physical health, we found no significant associations between dam and puppy response to stranger approach. This was at respective time points and at the puppy time points and that 6-week prepartum time point in dams. And we're thinking this may be due to, one, the tests occurring in different contexts, like I talked about. So dams were tested in their home pen, whereas puppies were tested immediately after isolation in the isolation pen. And also the influence of developmental stage on puppy response. So things like mobility and development of the fear period may not be fully there yet. Aside from the relationship to dams, we did find a significant association between 4 and 8-week puppy response to stranger approach, which is very interesting. And then in terms of physical health, dam and puppy physical health were positively correlated at both the 4-week and the 8-week time point. So overall, we've seen significant associations between dam and puppy measures of acute stress as indicated by the FGM, baseline measures of chronic stress in the dam and measures of acute stress in puppies, behavioral responses to the stressor of isolation, and physical health. Therefore, this suggests that dam and puppy welfare and commercial breeding kennels may be related. And this may be due to factors such as genetics and maternal care, environment, and learned experience, like I talked about before. However, this requires future study as we were unable to determine the exact mechanisms in this study. Overall, this provides new knowledge on the association between fear and stress-related factors in dams and puppies, which has been widely understudied in dogs and in this population as well. It provides the basis for breeding bitch selection in commercial breeding kennels, and also really brings the conversation to behavior with breeders. In the past, they've really been focused on genetics and experience and maybe maternal care towards the pups, but not really behavior of the dam. So this really helps us bring that into the conversation as well. And it aids in optimizing dam and puppy welfare in commercial breeding kennels. So overall, I'd like to thank everyone in the Crony Research Group, Dr. Jennifer Weller, who's in here, Dr. Arnott and Yuri Vaquero Espinoza, who are at Queen's University Belfast, Stanton Foundation for funding this work, and ISAE for having me. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for a very nice talk. Questions? Yes.
Thank you very much. That was really interesting.
Thank you.
Sorry if I missed it. Did you have any chance to control for the effect of different management and husbandry procedures at different kennels?
And not in this study because we were looking within the facilities and within the litters, so we didn't look at facility in the model. There were differences between facilities, however, though.
Could that impact your results in any way?
I think it could. I think definitely we'd have to look at different facilities and things like that because that could definitely affect prenatal stress. But in terms of putting facility in the model, I think it was more appropriate just to look at the mom and the puppy because the mom facility is kind of associated with the mom as well.
Okay,
Mhm.
thank you.
Thanks.
Oh, okay. I was just wondering, are the moms, do you know anything about the mom's origin? So were they from that breeding facility as well?
So we do have that written down. Some of them were from different breeding facilities that the breeder bought and then acquired later on in their life. Some of them were raised at the breeding facility. So what breeders sometimes do is they'll take puppies from litters that are born and then raise them and to be breeding bitches themselves. So it really just depends. Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have understood that there are some questions from the online members, but I don't have them on my screen.
Oh.
Okay. Well, one last question. I take the possibility of asking myself. So, I mean, the real question, I suppose, is whether there's a difference between the dams at the breeding facility and dams which are not in a breeding facility. So what do you know about that?
We see population differences in the effect of things like maternal care and prenatal stress, obviously on the effect of puppy welfare. So that's definitely something to keep in mind because these dams are in a very different environment than, let's say, a working dog facility or a breeder in a home or pet dogs or something like that. So that's something we're going to have to tease out a little bit more. We are doing a study that's in home breeders too. So that will hopefully tease out some of that, but we've got a lot more work to do.
More research is needed. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now moving on from fear and stress to positive human interactions, please. Uri Espinosa, please.
Oh, yeah, that's it. I couldn't find the presentation. So good morning, everyone. So cognitive biases are being increasingly used as a method to evaluate affective states in animals. And well, the advantage that this approach has over other measures of animal welfare is that cognitive bias tests are particularly useful for detecting the emotional balance of both positive and negative affective states. And well, the form of cognitive bias that has been predominantly used across species, including dogs, is judgment bias. Maybe the reason for this is that judgment bias tests do provide very valuable information about the emotional state that the animal is experiencing. However, they also have certain limitations, and probably the main one is that they can be very time consuming due to the training required for the animal to reach an inclusion criteria and thus be able to participate in the testing phase. Now, attention bias is another form of cognitive bias that has also been studied in fewer species, most of them farm animals and monkeys. And attention bias tests have the advantage that they require little to no training for the animals, which somehow gives them or makes them a more practical alternative to judgment bias tests for assessing animals in certain contexts. And so the way the attention bias test works is that they, depending on the affective or emotional state that the animal is experiencing, the test measures the amount of attention that an animal allocates to one stimulus compared to another. So for example, an animal that's experiencing like a negative affective state like anxiety or depression will allocate increased attention towards negative or threatening stimulus, and reduce its attention towards a positive or rewarding stimulus like food. Now, speaking about negative affective states, we can look at commercial breeding dogs. And the thing is, as we saw here previously, that dogs maintained in large-scale commercial breeding establishments spend most of their reproductive lives confined to kennels and have limited access to exercise, enrichment, and also opportunities to experience positive human interactions. And we know from research conducted in shelter dogs that long-term confinement can have detrimental effects on dog welfare, causing chronic stress and leading to the development of behavioral and physical health problems. Specifically speaking about commercial breeding dogs, it was also reported that dogs that were formerly used as breeding stock in this type of facilities exhibited higher rates of anxiety, compulsive behaviors, and fearfulness towards unfamiliar people and new situations. However, research in shelter dogs also has demonstrated that positive human interaction used as a form of enrichment can help mitigate this stress response that dogs have to the kennel environment. So putting all of this together, the aim of our study was to evaluate the effect of positive human interaction on the affective states of commercial breeding female dogs using an attention bias test. So we conducted our study in a licensed large-scale commercial dog breeding establishment located in the UK. And our sample size was 31 female dogs from different breeds and crossbreeds, and between ages of 9 months and 6 years of age. So first, dogs were pseudo-randomly assigned to either a control or an enriched group, trying to balance the groups by breed. Then dogs in the enriched group were exposed to a 4-week positive human interaction enrichment treatment. And the enrichment was conducted 3 days a week and consisted of a researcher going into the dog's kennel, offering tricks to the dog, encouraging the dog to play with toys, and also petting the dog whenever the dog asked for contact. On the other hand, dogs in the control group did not receive any additional human interaction other than the one they normally will have with the breeders while the breeders perform daily routine husbandry tasks. Then at the end of the treatment period, we tested all dogs in an attention bias test. And we also collected hair samples at 2 time points. So first, before starting the treatment period, and then on the day that the dogs were tested. And we did this to look for associations between the levels of hair cortisol and the results of the attention bias test. So the test that we used was adapted from a paradigm that was developed for sheep and cattle. So basically the test was conducted in an arena, and the positive stimulus that we used was a bowl containing wet dog food, which before starting the test was placed at the center of the arena. And the negative stimulus was an umbrella opened and closed continuously by a person, which again, before starting the test, was hidden behind a curtain in a room adjacent to the arena. So first, at the start of the test, the dog was released into the arena. Then 10 seconds later, the person hiding will open the curtain and start opening and closing the umbrella pointed towards the dog for 10 seconds. Then the person will stop and then close the curtain and remain still and hidden from the dog for the rest of the test. So we scored the behavior of the dog throughout the duration of the test, which was 3 minutes, starting from the moment the dog was released into the arena. And the main variables that we looked at was the frequency and duration of the attention of the dog towards the positive and negative stimulus, and the duration of the interaction with the positive stimulus. So these are the most relevant results that we found. Well, as we predicted, dogs in the control group allocated more attention towards the negative stimulus. So this is they looked more frequently towards the position of the potential threat. compared to the enriched dogs. Well, we didn't find any significant effect of the covariates age or the post-treatment levels of hair cortisol. Similarly, dogs in the enriched group spend more time interacting with the positive stimulus compared to the control dogs. And this difference between groups was significant for both the sniffing, the amount of time that the dog spent sniffing the football and eating from the football. Well, all of these results basically suggest that dogs that received the enrichment were probably more relaxed during the test and less distressed or disturbed by the threat, which was the umbrella. So maybe in a more positive affective state. And well, interestingly, we also found a non-significant trend for the relationship between the age of the dogs and the duration of the sniffing interaction, where the older the dogs were, the less time they spent sniffing the football. So just to conclude, our results support our initial hypothesis that positive human interaction can positively influence the affective state of commercial breeding dogs. And also the results of the attention bias test are similar to what has been previously reported in other species where animals experiencing negative affective states like anxiety or depression allocate more attention towards a threat and spend less time interacting with a rewarding stimulus. However, we also need to consider that other factors might have influenced the results of the attention bias test, like the breed of the dog, or also each of the dog's previous experiences, like the type and amount of socialization that they had during the early life. And also there might be differences between how females and males react during the attention bias test. However, we think that with more refinement and more research, the attention bias test could be a more practical cognitive bias methodology to assess affective states in dogs. And with this, I just want to thank my supervisor, Dr. Garrett Arnold, and the other students and collaborators that helped me to conduct this study. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Thank you for a very nice talk. Any questions on this? Yes. We have one over here. In the middle. No, in the middle. Up, up, up.
Hello. Hi. I'm just wondering. There seems to be a big difference between your negative and positive stimuluses. In that in the negative stimulus, there's a human present, and in the positive stimulus, there's no human present.
Mhm.
Given that you're testing a difference between dogs that have had pleasant experiences with humans and dogs that have a control group that doesn't have that experience, would that not be a larger factor or a factor for greater consideration than the umbrella and the food?
Yeah. I mean, well, there's a lot of things here that I couldn't get into, but I'll try to answer your question. So, yeah, the reason that we decided to use this umbrella as the negative stimulus is because based on other studies, it has already been used as a threatening, as a threat, to test reactivity in dogs. And we also did some testings with other dogs, and we saw that most of them, if not all of them, react like with a fearful reaction to us. So that's one thing. Then, yeah, of course, you will expect that dogs that were enriched by a human will probably demonstrate some interest in the presence of the person, right? Something that I didn't present here. We also measured, as you saw, we measured like the amount of interaction that the dogs had with a positive stimulus. So that's the time that they spend next to the football. So we also measured the amount of time that the dogs spent next to the place where the person, well, was. And we didn't find any difference really between groups. So we don't think that, I mean, the person was wearing a face mask, balaclava, so, and was unfamiliar to them. So I really don't think that might affected the results of the test. Yeah, but I see your point, yeah.
Any more questions? Yes. Over here. Could you please just say your name when you ask the question?
Thank you for an interesting talk. Janice Sigford, Michigan State. I'm wondering if you always presented the stimulus in the same order. Was it always negative first, followed by positive?
Well, yeah, it was when the dog was released into the arena, the ball was already there, the football, and then after 10 seconds, we presented the negative stimulus for 10 seconds, and then it was hidden. Yeah. And it was in the same order for all dogs as well.
Do you
Yeah.
think that might be important, though, to potentially also try to manipulate order effect a bit, just to see how whether that influences anything?
It might influence it. I mean, really, we just played along, tried to replicate what was done in other studies with other species. So yeah, but yeah.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, but we will need to switch to a new speaker. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now we're moving on to dog breed differences in reactions to a disgruntled stranger. It's interesting. Rachel Cadiel, please.
Thank you, Dr. Forkman, for your introduction. As you mentioned, my name is Rachel Cadell, and I'm a PhD candidate at North Carolina State University, studying under the advisement of Dr. Margaret Gruen and Dr. April Ketchowitz. And today I'm presenting some of my findings from my dissertation. And so this is the dog breed differences in reactions to a disgruntled stranger partially support veterinarians' distinct pain sensitivity ratings. To provide you some very important background, the International Association for the Study of Pain has determined that disparities occur globally related to pain recognition, treatment, and management. And these disparities pertain to human identities such as race, gender, and socioeconomic status. And these disparities may be a result of the human tendency to rely on stereotypes to justify that different groups of people experience pain differently. And we know that medical training does not eliminate this bias in our healthcare workers. We now know, thanks to a study by Dr. Gruen and colleagues in 2020, that these distinct pain sensitivity beliefs exist in veterinary medicine as well. Gruen and colleagues surveyed over 1,000 United States veterinarians and found that over 98% of US veterinarians agree that dog breeds differ in their pain sensitivity. And we further asked these veterinarians to rate 28 different dog breeds, and they were able to provide distinct pain sensitivity ratings for each breed. And not only that, but veterinarians had a very small variance, indicating a great deal of agreement among the profession on these pain sensitivity ratings. Further, when veterinarians were asked what attributed to their pain sensitivity ratings, they applied the greatest deal of importance to temperament. But what remains unknown is how these distinct beliefs developed in veterinarians, as no known evidence suggests that breeds differ in their pain physiology. And while we do have evidence that breeds differ in their behavior, we also have evidence that there is substantial within breed differences in behavior, meaning that, for example, a Labrador Retriever would be equally likely to behave similarly to a Boston Terrier as another Labrador Retriever. And we're so interested in this because veterinarians' beliefs could impact the treatment of pain in dogs. So that left us with the research question we asked today, which are, do these breed pain sensitivity beliefs have a physiological basis, or are veterinarians responding to something else, such as behavior? For this study, we conducted a cross-sectional observational study. in which we recruited client-owned dogs from North Carolina and surrounding states to participate in a single-day study at the CVM Health and Wellness Center. Our inclusion criteria were that dogs were healthy, non-painful, and of adult age for their distinct breed. And we recruited dogs from 10 breeds or breed types of interest based on the Gruen and colleagues study results, which I will talk about in the following slide. Further, we collected data from August 2020 to June of 2021. So this was about a year-long study, and we had a final sample of 149 dogs. These are the breeds, the 10 breed types of interest that we collected data on. And so these were selected based on the findings from Gruen and al. In 2020. And these were the veterinarians' pain sensitivity classifications. So veterinarians rated the following breeds as having low sensitivity, average sensitivity, and high sensitivity to pain. And we also balanced these groups as best we could based on dog size. To collect information about pain sensitivity, we use quantitative sensory testing, which I will refer to as QST. And this is routinely performed in humans and also the ideal method to assess pain sensitivity in dogs. Differences in QST have been demonstrated between healthy, non-painful dogs and dogs with osteoarthritis in prior studies. And in the larger study, we collected multiple forms of QST as they measured different receptors of pain. But today I'm going to present to you the thermal QST data, as this is a short presentation. And so for this, you'll notice that we have a thermal probe, and this thermal probe we set at a predetermined temperature of 49 degrees Celsius. We shave a portion of the dog's hair about 1 by 1 inches on their metatarsus and apply this thermal probe. The dog has a total of 20 seconds as the safety cutoff, and they can remove their leg at any time. So we're measuring their behavioral response, and specifically we're measuring the latency in seconds for the dog to remove their paw from the thermal probe. And so I'll show you a video of Gunnar doing that here. So you see the thermal probe is applied and the stopwatch is started. And then as soon as Gunnar removes his leg, the stopwatch is stopped, and that determines his pain sensitivity threshold. To measure behavior, we collected various behavioral measurements using emotional reactivity tests. We also collected cognitive data, but today I will present to you a portion of the data from the disgruntled stranger test. And we use this test to assess fear and anxiety that dogs may experience from non-painful aspects of the veterinary environment. So things that the veterinarians may be picking up on that aren't related to pain. In this task, a handler takes the dog into a room with an unfamiliar stranger that's wearing a hooded sweatshirt. And this stranger is speaking loudly into their phone for about 30 seconds about an American football game that didn't go their way. We video record this test, and then we use a trained observer, that was myself, to code the dog's behavior using an ethogram with predefined behaviors, as well as scales, ordinal scales, to measure things such as their initial response to the stranger and their approach score. We used an additional trained individual to code 20% of the videos, and our inter-rater reliability was excellent. Today, I will only be presenting the data on the approach score. And this approach score is the dog's response after the 30 seconds is completed. They're prompted by the handler to approach the stranger. At this time, the stranger removes their hood and talks to them in a friendly demeanor tone of voice. And we see how the dog responds to approaching the stranger. And this is done on an ordinal scale from 1 to 4. With 1 indicating that they immediately approach the stranger. And we'll see an example of that here with Oliver.
It's all about as clear as day. Can I say hi?
We also have a score of 2 and a score of 3 that indicate that the dog approached the stranger cautiously or approached the stranger with reluctance. And then we have a score of 4. This is our most extreme on the scale that indicates a dog refused to approach the stranger. And we'll see that here with Javier.
Hardly clear as day. Okay. So do you want to say hi? Want to say hi?
Javier did not want to say hi. For our statistical analysis, I first used JUMP to conduct an ANOVA to examine the QST values for the thermal probe by breed, and comparisons were made using individual t-tests. Because I conducted multiple comparisons, I also used a post hoc analysis using the Tukey-Kramer's method. And what we saw was that dog breeds did differ in their QST values, but not in the way that veterinarians predicted. So on our x-axis here, I'm showing you the dog breed or breed type. And then on the y-axis, we have the latency to respond to the thermal probe in seconds. So meaning how long it took the dog to remove their leg. And I also am showing in the colors, the blue indicates the breeds that the veterinarians rated as having low pain sensitivity, purple average pain sensitivity, and red high pain sensitivity. And if this was as the veterinarians predicted, we would expect all of those colors to be grouped together, the blues, the purples, and the reds. But what we see here is that they're not. So to show you an example, the pit bull, which was rated as having low pain sensitivity by veterinarians, and the German Shepherd rated as having high pain sensitivity by the veterinarians, appear similar in their latency to respond to the thermal probe. While the Border Collie, rated as having average pain sensitivity, actually had the lowest pain sensitivity threshold, meaning that they removed their leg the fastest from the thermal probe. For the stranger analysis, we used a likelihood ratio to examine breed effect for stranger approach score. And we saw that dog breeds did differ in their willingness to approach. And this appeared more similar to what the veterinarians predicted. So we see that the greater proportion of breeds that immediately approached the stranger included the Golden Retriever, Pit Bull, and Border Collie, 2 of which are breeds rated as having low pain sensitivity by the veterinarians. While the greater proportion of breeds that were reluctant or refused to approach stranger were those of the Chihuahua, the Maltese, and the Siberian Husky. So those more extreme reactions to approaching a stranger were exhibited by breeds that were rated as having high pain sensitivity by the veterinarians. This suggests that there is some clinical significance to how veterinarians perceive dogs when they approach strangers, as veterinarians are most likely to be strangers to the dogs approaching them in their clinic. So we saw that differences do exist in thermal thresholds and emotional reactivity across dog breeds, and that QST findings do not support the veterinarian reported pain sensitivity beliefs. However, veterinarians' ratings of pain sensitivity more closely aligned with dog breeds' willingness to approach the stranger. Future directions include evaluating different emotional reactivity tests and other QST modalities as we collected that data, and also to collaborate with other scientists to explore whether veterinarians in other countries, based on their geographical location and their cultures, hold breed-specific pain sensitivity beliefs. And further, we'd like to determine if these veterinarian breed-specific pain sensitivity beliefs do affect pain recognition and treatment, as that is currently unknown. And I would like to briefly thank all of the people that had contributed to this project, all of those that helped collect data, all of those that encouraged me, and then also the funding sources. So American Kennel Club, Canine Health Foundation funded this project, and the Congress Attendance Fund and Purina Pet Food Scholarship funded my travel here and my being able to present today. So I'd also like to thank the audience for hanging in there with me.
Thank you very much. So questions, please.
Sabine Gebhardt from Bern, Switzerland. Thank you for your talk. Do you have some data if, for example, different amount of analgesia are used in the different dog breeds? So do you look at the different uses?
Yes. So in this study, we looked at normal or healthy, non-painful dogs. So we didn't have any dogs in pain, and we didn't look at the amount of analgesia used. But we have another study that's running, looking at a retrospective analysis of veterinary records in the ER or in the emergency room. So we're looking at how veterinarians assign analgesia and assign pain scores to dogs entering the emergency room based on their different breed type.
And do you have any results yet?
We don't have results of that. It's a really large study because we're doing many years. There's a lot of noise in that data, as you can imagine, based on the different veterinarians that are seeing different students that are seeing the dogs. So we don't have anything yet, but I'm really excited for that. We also have another kind of study down the pipeline that we are interested in kind of looking at decision-making in veterinarians based on breed type.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions here? Yes, there's one at the end. At the back. Sorry.
Hello. Sorry. Joel Cosby from the University of Kentucky. Rachel, I was wondering if you have explored the familiarity that those vets have with the dog breeds and if that affected their pain rating. Like if breeds that they see commonly, they would be more used to it.
Yeah, so what was really interesting in the initial study was that the veterinarians were able to provide pain sensitivity ratings for all of those 28 dog breeds, and they did select the 28 dog breeds that would be more common or more prevalent in the United States. But there didn't seem to be a difference in like the ability to present ratings for them. They were able to present ratings for each of those dog breeds, and the variance was really small for each of them, indicating a great deal of agreement. But we have another study that we ran looking at dog breeds and pain sensitivity ratings in the general public, undergraduates in animal related fields, and then veterinarian students years 1 through 4, and then veterinary faculty and staff. And we do see that clinical experience and veterinary education contribute to the development of these distinct pain sensitivity beliefs. And that seems to be stronger and more certain breeds with the clinical experience, such as German Shepherds, Siberian Huskies, and Chihuahuas.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much. We'll move on to. And now next speaker is Anna Kies, who's going to talk about masked strangers. Or humans mask.
It's humans masks.
Sounds very strange. Please explain.
I will. Okay, thank you everyone for coming and thank you for the introduction. My name is Anna Kish. I'm from Budapest, Hungary, and I'm going to talk about how dogs interact with humans who are wearing a mask. So luckily here we don't see many people wearing masks anymore, but a few years back this was a common thing that people would appear wearing face coverings of different types. So that's what inspired this study. It has been shown by human psychological research that this face mask wearing has several effects on how humans interact with each other, starting from communication problems, both because we can't see each other's face and also because it blocks part of what we are saying, the vocal information. And also it seems to introduce anxiety, frustration, and other kind of problems. So it's not only humans who live or lived in a society where everyone was wearing face masks, but obviously also our pets had this experience. And any of you who did dog training and things like that, it was quite common for trainers to switch to this specific type of training to train dogs to tolerate masks, not to be afraid of it and things like that. So we started out with this question, okay, how does this mask wearing affect dogs? So the reason why this is actually an interesting question, I think, is because we know that dogs can extract several information that might be potentially influenced by this face covering. There have been several studies to show that dogs use the visual information on humans' face. They can recognize their owners or familiar people based on the face alone. They also read emotions on the face, at least proven by different scanning patterns and also making behavioral difference between let's say, happy and angry faces, for example. And obviously, they also use vocal information of commands, which we know that might partly be blocked. So this is, for me, both an applied question of whether dogs suffer any impairment because of these practices, but it's also, I think, an interesting basic question of how dogs cope with this situation. And I wanted to refer here to a study a few years back that was done in Vienna by Forzin Moller and colleagues, where he showed that dogs can extract information from only parts of the faces. And this is interesting because he showed the dogs in the touchscreen device that you can see here, either the upper or the lower part of the face, and dogs were pretty good with that task. So I also had this prediction in mind that dogs might be able to cope with it and use only the upper half of the face in the situation that we were living. Okay, so these are the two questions. First of all, whether dogs are influenced by this is important because you've seen also in the previous presentation that all the tests in the last years in dog labs have been done with experimenters and owners wearing face masks. And we were a little worried, we were doing the same, whether that's a valid way of collecting data or whether our data is being influenced by these practices. And then a second applied question is whether how the dogs feel about it, so whether their welfare is impacted by seeing humans in masks. So what we did was to test a group of dogs. They were adult average fed dogs of different breeds and mongrels, males, females, mixed. And we had two test occasions in a random order. Both times the same tests were carried out. In one time, either the first or the second, the experimenter was wearing a mask while she did the test. The other time it was the same experimenter not wearing a mask. And like I said, it was counterbalanced whether we started with one condition or the other. We selected 5 test situations for this experiment. And as you will see, I'm not sure how much this generalizes to all of the tests, but I want to show you the result for at least these tests. Criteria based on which we selected them is that we wanted to have tests where we expected that the mask covered important information for the dogs that they needed to use in the test, and also situations where we expected that it shouldn't be a problem. So the first one, I will talk more in detail about what each test is. It's a spontaneous following, so it's just a simple affiliative thing, how the dog reacts to a stranger who is not interacting with the dog yet. The second one is a pointing following task, where the main information is the human's arm. So they have to use the pointing arm as a cue, and supposedly the mask isn't covering anything important. Then we have a test that I call emotional recognition, where the human is acting out either a happy or a fearful emotion, and that's both vocal emotion and facial expression, which is in a big part covered in a mask situation. We also had some basic obedience commands that we recorded, and then we had a threatening approach, which is pretty similar to the test situation that we've seen before, that we have a human behaving in a strange way, and then we wanted to see whether the dog would approach eventually or would be frightened. And we also made the owners to fill out a personality questionnaire for the dogs to have some data about individual differences of each dog. So this questionnaire has 5 personality traits, and the owner had to rate several questions on a scale, and like, for example, how friendly my dog is, or how afraid it is of strangers, how it behaves in different situations, and rate it in a scale from 1 to 7. Okay, so the first test I'm going to talk about is this pointing following. You can see in the photograph what's happening, that the dog is looking at the experimenter. We have 2 hiding places. One of them is baited with the food, and the experimenter would point to the correct location, and the dog needs to make its choice based on this pointing gesture. We had 10 trials, and we recorded how many times the dog would choose the correct container. And here you can see the results with and without the mask. Clearly, there is no difference. So they chose the correct container at about the same rate in both situations. The next test was this emotional recognition, which is also depicted in the photograph. So similarly, we have two pots, one of them hidden with a bait, and the experimenter would approach both of these pots, and for one of them, she would look there and express something happily. Oh, look, this is very nice. And then she would go to the other pot and say, oh, no, this is disgusting. And then we expected the dogs to choose the happy pot, and that's based on previous research. I don't know if you can see, but I put up the citation there. So it has been shown that that's the normal reaction of the dogs to choose the happy container. And here you can find the results with the mask and without the mask. And again, there seems to be a slight trend, but no, that's statistically not significant. So even though we expected dogs to have it more easily when there is no face covering, actually there wasn't a difference. What is interesting starts from here. So from the spontaneous following test, this is again just a picture showing what happened. So the experimenter had a child toy, and she was carrying pieces of this toy from one side to the other. So she was ignoring the dog and just going back and forth, and we recorded how much time the dog would follow the experimenter and spend time in proximity. And if we just look at the difference between the two groups, then again, we see that the percentage of the time they spend in proximity, that's basically the same between the two groups. However, what we find is that there is a relationship between the dog's personality and how they react to the mask. So on the y-axis, you can see it's a difference score between the mask and the non-mask percentage that the dogs achieve, and it's related to the openness questionnaire score. So what we found is that the dogs that are more open, they had less problem. They made less difference actually between the masked and the non-masked experimenter. Okay, the next test was a simple basic obedience test. As you can see, we used the command sit and lay down, which all dogs included in the test were familiar with. And we just recorded whether they would do the command on the first commanding, or whether they needed more time. And you can see the number of successful trials out of 10. And again, at the group level, there is no difference between masked and non-masked individuals, but there is a relationship with the dog's personality. So the difference between the masked and non-masked situations correlates with the level of consciousness of each dog. So it shows that the dog that is rated more conscious would do the commands even if it's with a masked person. And the last test situation we used was this threatening approach, which I always like to say that it's not really threatening for the dog. So what is happening is that the experimenter looks at the dog who is held by the owner on a leash and just slowly approaches, looking into the eye of the dog. So it's not that we are beating up the dog or doing anything really negative. It's more of an ambivalent situation, because that's not a normal way to interact with the dog. So if we hold this constant eye contact without talking and approaching just really slowly, it's a really good indicator of whether dogs would approach friendlily or avoid, and how they react. So for this test, we have a score of the reaction starting from a friendly approach to aggressive responses, and with the ambivalent in between. And here is the first time that we can actually see an important difference between the masked and the non-masked situation. So we have found that when the experimenter was wearing a mask, then the dogs would show some aggressive responses and more ambivalent, and not as friendly as when without the mask, which would be normal for the average. So to conclude from all this, I can say that in most of the test situations, we didn't find any difference between how dogs behave with masked and non-masked experimenters. This included pointing, following, emotion recognition, spontaneous following behavior, and basic obedience tasks. as you can see, these are all very simple test situations. So like I said in the beginning, I don't think this generalizes for all the tests that are done with dogs, but I'm happy to see that at least some basic tests seem to work both with and without the mask, because there have been many data collection in the past years where experimenters were forced to wear the mask. It is important to point out, however, that the differential reaction of the dogs to the experimenters' mask wearing might be dependent on their personality. We didn't find this in all tests, but in a couple of them, and this shows that this is something to be cautious about and take into account. And like I said, we only monitored personality, but there might be many other individual differences which impact how much the dogs are influenced by the humans' mask wearing, including training and many other things. And also very important, I think, is that there was one test where we did find a difference in dogs' behavior, which was more of an agonistic threatening situation where dogs would react more aggressively or at least less friendly to the mask wearing experimenter. And here I wanted to point out that there have been a few studies which reported that during the COVID times, during lockdowns, the number of dog bites increased in different countries actually where these studies have been carried out. And these studies have explained it because with the reason that people were in closed areas with their own dogs, and maybe they were more stressed and things like that. But actually these are not really teased apart, whether the dog's bites are to their own family or to strangers. And I would just like to put in the idea that this might be at least partly because of people wearing masks in the streets or anywhere else. Okay, with that, I would like to thank you for listening, and I would like to thank my collaborators and sponsors, and if there's time, I'm open for questions.
Thank you. Any questions here? Please.
Hi, Rachel Cadell from North Carolina State University. I just wondered if you thought, based on your conclusions, that base arousal state or base emotional state might influence the dog's reaction to a masked stranger. So kind of with you seeing the dog bites, maybe that has to do more, or if you looked at anything that had to do with it being like if a more stressed dog at baseline reacted more threatening or more in that threatening situation.
Yeah, so we have used this threatening stranger situation quite a lot already. So I know that there are things which would influence it. And one of that is especially this baseline stress level, so to say. So we've done tests where we prime the dog with a friendly stranger, petting it, etc. And that would influence how the dogs react to another stranger in this situation. So yeah, that's certainly true. And obviously here we didn't control what happened to the dogs before they came to the lab. So I don't know how stressed the dog or the owner was. Yeah, but that I think that we can assume that there's random noise between the masked and non-masked groups. So I would assume that they had similar kind of stressors. But yeah, I agree that this would certainly be an influence.
Thank you. Great presentation.
Thanks.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. I'm Inonke Rijmert from Wageningen University. And I was wondering, because of you have limited results, does it mean that dogs recognize a human then more based on the eye expression, or more the whole body, or the smell, or the sound of the human, instead of more like the whole face?
Yeah, I mean, this data that we collected here, I think doesn't answer it, but there is previous research on many of these things. So, for example, what I can tell you is that when dogs look at faces, we conducted eye tracking study with human faces, then they were scanning the mouth region the most. But still, like I said, there are studies where they used upper and lower half of the face and actually left and right half of the face, and they could match them based on emotions. So it seems that they use all of that. We also know that dogs can extract information from the voice, many different information, they recognize the owner, etc. On smell, I'm not sure. I know one study where they had to recognize their owners, which was covered by blankets, and they only had the smell information, and they were not very successful with that. But yeah, I would say that dogs use all these modalities together, and the question is how much just losing part of one modality impacts it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. And that concludes the long, very long presentations. Now we're moving on to the very, very, very short presentations. So it's a 1-minute presentation for the people of the poster sessions. Yes, 60 seconds. Sorry. Focus out, please.
We are aware that not only dogs in shelters, but also pet dogs are exposed to multiple stressors in their daily lives. In recent years, it has been often reported that the use of sensory stimuli leads to reduced stress. For example, classical music can decrease the stress level of dogs. Lavender and chamomile essential oils can increase the time spent resting and decrease the time spent in locomotion, etc. However, the effect of sequential exposure to multiple stimuli over a short period of time has not been investigated. This prompted us to examine the effect of short-term exposure using the salivary cortisol concentration and behavior of dogs when intensely exposed to natural images, classical music, and aroma essential oils over a short period of time. More information in our poster. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Oh, it was just there. Yep. Hi, everybody. My name is Rachel, and I work for Dogs Trust, which is the largest canine welfare charity in the UK. And the data from my poster that I'm presenting today was collected as part of a longitudinal study in canine health, behaviour, and welfare. We issue surveys to our owners as their dogs age, and we ask a lot of different questions in these surveys. And one of those questions is, does your dog display any behaviours that you find to be a problem? We looked at 3 time points, the 6, 12 and 18-month surveys, and we found that the 4 most common behaviours were barking, pulling on the lead, recall issues, and jumping up at people. We then looked at the significance of the proportion of these behaviours across the 3 different time points and found that for the first 3 behaviours that I listed, there was a significant difference, but there was not a significant difference in the proportion of dogs that jumped up at people. If you're interested to learn more and talk dogs with me, then please come find me. My post is number 2. Thank you very much for your time.
Hi, thanks. Hi, I'm Marina. I'm from RBC in London. So the pandemic sent the world pretty dog crazy. There was upticks in both the adoption and purchase of puppies during the early pandemic. At RBC, since the summer of 2020, we've been running the pandemic puppies program. We like peas, exploring main questions as to how has puppy buying changed and why, and also who has been purchasing puppies. We've already documented quite marked changes during 2020 compared to 2019 puppy buying. And in my poster today and in this study, we have explored whether there's been a so-called long COVID effect, or the hangover effects into the later pandemic in 2021 that are relevant to dog welfare. I won't have got any time to say what, but the key factors are that some of the changes that we have documented do seem to be persisting, and indeed some seem to be getting worse, particularly dogs being imported illegally underage with passports to the UK. So I'm happy to chat about this. I'll see you all later. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ivana Sabolek. I work at the Faculty of Veterinary Medicine at the Department of Animal Hygiene, Behavior and Welfare. I'm assistant and PhD student. At our poster, you can see our study entitled Information Quality and Attitudes of Cat Owners in Croatia about cat keeping and health. Our study included a preliminary sample of 300 cat owners, which answered our online questionnaire in 2021. The results suggest that cat owners in Croatia are well informed about the cat's keeping and health, and they have rational attitudes about cat's ownership. But more information you can see at our poster on number 4.
We seem to be missing one. Let's move on to the next one, then, please.
Hello, my name is Javiera from Chile. So attitudes influence the human-animal interaction. Also, there is a link between antisocial behavior and violence to animals since childhood, all that related to a lack of empathy. So we apply 3 surveys. The first one measures attitudes towards the humane treatment of animals. The second one measures empathic tendencies in children. And finally, we use photographs of a dog showing different emotions. We found that human-directed empathy is associated with attitude towards animals. Also, children who recognized the happy face of the dog were associated with more positive attitudes towards animals. Overall, these results could help design strategies for improving deficits in empathy and therefore antisocial behavior in children. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sam Jack, and I'm a final year PhD student at Queen's University in Belfast. My study looked to determine if individual attachment to pets was affected by possessing high psychopathic traits. So these are characterized by callousness, a lack of empathy, and an inability to form strong emotional bonds. The study also looked at the effect of infant features, so facial features, which are associated with babies, and cuteness. So round chubby cheeks, low-lying eyes, small nose and mouth. So I had a look at those on individuals' attachment as well. So just to give you a wee spoiler alert, there was no effect of psychopathic traits or cuteness on owner attachment, but we did find that owners were more attached to pedigree animals and childish individuals had a stronger attachment. If you'd like to hear more about the study, please come see me. I'm in room number 1, poster 7, back of the room. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Grace Carroll. I'm a lecturer at Queen's University Belfast in the same department as Sam. So I'm in the School of Psychology. And my poster today is on a kind of larger project that we're working on called CARP, so Companion Animal Adoption and Relinquishment during the COVID-19 pandemic. So this study in particular is a qualitative study, and we got the perspectives of shelter staff on what happened during COVID-19. And we actually identified 3 key impacts. So there was an impact on the animals, an impact on staff identity, and an impact on organizational processes. And surprisingly, this wasn't all bad. So there was actually some benefits of having lockdowns, having higher demand for pets, for example. So there's a number of benefits and disadvantages, and there are things that we can learn from this experience. So we've highlighted 3 key recommendations, which I go into in more detail in my poster. So if you're interested in finding out more about this, I'm poster 8, I think, straight in the door on the right in room 1.
That concludes the posters who are here. I think we have some online ones. So please. Elizabeth Walsh. We can't hear you. Can you check if she is online? I'm very sorry, but I don't think we have time to. Please come and see Elizabeth Ward's poster on animal mind. Let's move on to the next one then, please. Sarah Plato. Could you introduce your poster, please? No sound. I'm sorry, but we will have to move on to the next one, please. There's no sound here either. There seems to be something wrong with the Zoom. Could you just then show the last poster, please? I think you will just have to go to the poster rooms and look for the posters. Seems like the traditional in-person way of doing things. Before we leave,
I will announce this later after lunch, but please visit the posters at Exordo. Those that are online, those that are physical, you can visit the poster rooms, but those that are online, just visit it in the Exordo platform where you all uploaded the posters, the presentations and everything. Yes, thanks. Sorry.
and before you leave, for those of you who signed up to Eating with Ethologists, could you just please pick your food and move to the tables with the right number? And those who don't eat with ethologists, could you please avoid those tables? Thank you. Thank you very much for attending.